get a little notification, but everyone else who's attending will not be on the recording. So
that's clever. That's smart. I don't know how you do that.
it's a spotlight. But if you have questions and you talk, we'll hear your voice. We just won't hear you. We won't see your faces.
And they can pop questions in the chat at any time, right, Erin?
Absolutely. I'll be monitoring the chat for questions. Also, if you want to raise your hand, I'll be checking those as well.
Perfect. So yes, please jump in throughout this morning's presentation. We would love some questions and interactivity as we go through. All right. As we get started, just take a breath or two. Those of you that know me know that I like to start with some regulation and some grounding, but just pat yourself on the back and then pat yourself on the other back. You're doing this. You have already come so far in this process. We are entering the exciting interview stage, and we want to make sure that you feel prepared for every aspect of it. Congratulations on getting this far in the program and in this final placement process. So just take a breath and get comfortable in your seat. All right, here we go.
All right, Dean Beer, I'm not seeing the PowerPoint, and I'm not sure if I'm alone in that.
Well, let's see here. I'm kind of seeing it from a funny point of view too. So how about now?
Now I'm seeing it. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So let me back up. Here we are with the name of our workshop and taking a couple breaths, patting yourself on the back, and boom. How's that?
Oh, there we go. Okay. Now I got you. All right. Well, I'm glad everybody's here. As you know, we are happy to support student support in while you're in school, while you're in your internships. And so today what we're going to be talking about is there are a lot of different streams of funding for being in school, right? You've got your grant funded training programs. I don't know if we can do a show of hands, but you can raise your own hand internally if you're in the IBHS program or the GRACE program or any of those kinds of things. St. David's bilingual. Those are the grant funded training programs, and that's a way to get some funding for your education. Academic scholarships, of course. We've got our Steve Hicks scholars and all that. Work-based placements, that's what WBP stands for. If you've applied and gotten a work-based placement, then that's one thing. But that's not what we're talking about today. Those are other subjects. What we are talking about today is stipends, including federal work study. So stipends are that's funding that comes from the agencies through the agencies. So yeah, and federal work study we'll talk about a little bit as well. But it also comes through the agency at this time. Okie doke. Does that make sense to folks? Anybody have questions about that?
So we wanted to start with checking on your comfort level of how comfortable are you negotiating for financial compensation? Talking about money, because this can be challenging. This is a skill that I personally need to develop. And if you can develop this early in your profession, great. How comfortable are you negotiating for other types of compensation on top of stipends? So on a scale of 1 to 10, yes, Andrea, I'm not sure if it's Andrea or Andrea, I apologize, is a 2? Yes, like actually out of 10, so 1 out of 10. So 1 is not comfortable at all, and 10 is nailed it, I got this. 2, 1, 1, 5 for Tammy, okay, 5 for Amelia. 3 or 5, yes, depending on the person you're talking to, Rachel, is that what you mean by that? Like the setting? And please unmute. Okay, got it. Good. Other responses, 4 out of 10 for Casey. Okay. And you know what's interesting for me is I am like a 9 out of 10 when I'm negotiating for someone else. But when it's negotiating for me, I'm like a 2 or 3. And so really thinking about how that might impact your conversation. So when you go into these conversations in your interview, absolutely, you are negotiating for yourself, but you are also negotiating for the larger group of funded placements. So for me, it's helpful to kind of think of it in 2 terms of, yes, I'm advocating and negotiating for myself, but also by putting it out there, I'm continuing the conversation for future students. So if that helps you, that was something that helped me. All right.
Yeah, I'm just really glad that we're talking about this now because I'm still really low on this scale. And I think if I'd been thinking about it when I was a student and practicing it when I was a student, I think things would be different in my world. But anyway.
So the next question, again, for those of you that know me, of course, is, anyone want to predict it? What would it take to increase that number by 1? So if you were a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or a 4 or a 5, what would it take to get to be a 2 or a 6? So think about that and put that in the chat box. I'm real curious. What would it take just to increase it by a little bit? So not to get to a 10, but just up a little bit. Anybody have any ideas? And you can certainly unmute and share if you want to. Have some planned verbiage. Do's and don'ts. Knowing that the person would also be open to discussing stipend. Good. Knowing what and when to say it. You guys just set the agenda for our presentation today.
I know. You could just turn the microphone over, right? Just
exactly. We're done. Doot, doot, doot. Confidence, being okay with silence. Yes. Yes. Letting the question sit there. Yeah.
I want to add, maybe as much as it's helpful to know and have confidence, and those are all important skills, and that's exactly what we're going to be talking about. But I would also add to that, being okay with not knowing. That's a really important skill in social work, is being okay with the unknown in the in-between and stepping into it.
Yeah. And is it Andrea or Andrea? I just want to make sure I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Andrea.
Andrea, thank you. Andrea has a good point, knowing that they won't be uninterested after you ask. So what we're going to talk a little bit about today is how this looks different than an employment negotiation, because you don't want to go into an internship interview and ask for a stipend and them say no, and then them not offer you the position. So it's a little different around, if you know that you are interested in the placement, even if they are not offering a stipend or increasing their stipend, make sure you let them know that. So we're going to talk about some of the language around that too, because that's a very important differentiation between employment negotiation and stipends for internships. Which brings us to our next slide, which is the difference between practicum and employment. And so this, like I just said, this process is different, and you're looking for a learning opportunity. So in addition to the stipends, how can you help me meet my learning objectives? Because I am paying to be here and I need to get these learning objectives met. So it's kind of a balance, which is a bit different than an employment opportunity.
Yeah. So one of the things you want to do is, of course, going in, it helps to go in weighing the practicum benefits and being aware of that, because your agency is going to want to know that is going to want to feel your confidence in knowing that they are offering something too. So this is a mutually beneficial relationship. What you're doing is trying to make it more mutually beneficial, which includes, just like you want them to acknowledge the strengths that you're bringing, you want to be able to acknowledge, you don't have to say these things. I'm not talking about this thing, but to go in anchored in this, recognizing that you're going to be receiving social work educational supervision, you're getting hours and academic credits, that when we were talking about internships, if I may, Erin is fairly new to the school, and she was like, oh, it's like a residency. Like, you wouldn't want a doctor to practice on you without practicing under close supervision. So this is learning in a protected environment. And you have access to specialized settings. I mean, that you wouldn't otherwise just get to walk into the inner sanctum of some of these settings. So they're opening themselves up to that. You have networking opportunities as a result of this within the agency, and also in the agencies that the agency connects with. And then, of course, that advanced specialized experience. So just kind of go in. It helps when you're in a partnership to acknowledge the strengths and weaknesses of both parties or all parties.
And another practicum benefit, which I think we talk a little bit further down the line, is the potential for employment after your internship. So you can absolutely ask, what is the likelihood that you hire interns after a placement? Because that may weigh pretty heavily for you. And if they can't do the stipend or an increase in stipend, that may be something you want to take into account as you make your decision. Yeah,
so you want to ask about financial supports that the internship has, the stipend amount, and I will say that stipends, as I think maybe some of you don't know, social work education has a long history of having unpaid internships, and so this is we've been working on a cultural shift for over a decade in the Austin area. So this is something that has started happening, and certainly COVID and adding student voices has increase the urgency around that. And so this may be the first time that and one of the person you're interviewing with has ever had a student ask about increasing stipends. They're like, we have a stipend, we have $17.12. Like, what more do you want? And so the stipend conversation is new to them too. And when we survey our field instructors, the folks who are supervising you out in your agencies, they all want you to have paid internships. I'm sure not every single solitary person, but overwhelmingly, they're like, absolutely. The world is different from when it was when I was a student. So anyway, so asking about the stipend amount, is that, how do they come up with that? Is there any negotiation on that? We're going to talk about how, well, I'm getting there. Also, are there other financial supports? Is there parking or travel reimbursement? Sometimes, especially for entry-level positions, they have travel reimbursement to help pay for the commute coming in. So that if you're under a certain number of hours, if you're under a certain amount of financial compensation, they can provide an additional stipend to help with travel or to cover the cost of parking, which I wish UT would cover the cost of parking, but that's another story. And then also the federal work study approval and eligibility. We're going to talk more about this. I think folks are most folks here aware that we have an inaugural program with federal work study funding. We're working with the Office of Scholarship and Financial Aid, and eligible agencies, and most of our agencies are eligible because most of them are nonprofit, governmental, and or educational. And so many of our agencies are working to put in an application for federal work study funding, which would allow them to provide a base of $3,500 for your spring internship. So we've been advertising this to folks. I've already been on email this morning, communicating with folks about and agencies about it. But one of the things you can ask is, have you submitted your federal work study application? And they might go, yes, we are in process, or it's already done. Or they might be, well, we're struggling, but we're trying. Or it may be like, what are you talking about? Because even though, as we all know, we don't read every single one of our emails, we don't pay attention to everything that comes across. And so one of the things that's really good about you in this role, you are really powerful as somebody who can say, there's this new opportunity. And I don't know all the answers. We're going to talk about this in a second. I don't know all the answers, but here's where you can find them. So for the federal work study approval and eligibility, one of the main things you want to do is submit your own FAFSA to make sure that you are eligible, because why go too far down that path if you know that you're not even going to be eligible for it. And then also for agencies and students, y'all can apply into spring, like you can have this conversation in the interview. You can also have this conversation in January. If you're like, so in the interview, we talked about the federal work study application. Did y'all get around to that? And they could be like, well, we meant to, but we were a little behind. And so you can say to them, look, you can still apply, because you can still receive funding even into the spring. Like even if they weren't approved till March, you could get some funding. Now, the longer you wait, the less likely that is, and the smaller the amount could be. But it's still worth pursuing, not just for you, but as Professor Beer was saying, also for those who come behind you, if you help them set this up while you're there. Now, hopefully that won't be the case. Hopefully you'll talk about it in the interview. They'll go, yes, we're on it. You can say, great, here's the information you need to pursue further, and move on.
Tanya, quick question from Reagan. Is it true that you can only get federal work study if your hours are 20 hours or less a week?
No. There's a funny thing. We don't want to get into the technicality, little bitty things. It is not true. If you think of it as a $3,500 base for the spring semester, and that's whether you're doing 19 hours a week or 40 hours a week. And that doesn't seem fair, but it seems more fair than getting $0. So we're moving in the right direction, which is what we want to keep pushing. So you are absolutely eligible for, if you are eligible, and if your agency is eligible, and if y'all are approved together, if this marriage happens, then you are eligible for that $3,500 base for the spring semester, regardless of the number. Well, if you had like 10 hours a week, that would cut back. It needs to be 16 hours or more.
I have a question, quick
Yes.
question too.
Go ahead.
When y'all say submit your FAFSA, it's the 23-24 FAFSA that we did before the fall started, right?
Correct.
So you've already done that, we're fine. Okay, cool.
As long as you check the box that you want to be eligible for federal work study. So, and if you didn't, you can go back and ask your loan officer to change that for you.
Correct.
And we are available. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I actually contacted them, their like department, and I was like, hey, can you look at my thing again? Am I eligible? And then they sent me an email a couple weeks later and were like, here you go. So that worked for me. It's like personally reaching out to them.
Great. Thank you for that feedback. That's
Yeah.
helpful. And we
Yeah,
are available to answer more federal work study questions, but we want to focus back to the stipend negotiation for this workshop in particular. But please keep the questions coming. You can email
Yep.
Tanya. She's the point person, but I'm learning about it as I go along. So we will find you the answers.
We're making it up. We are actually, this is a new concept. And so we are creating this together, and we need your voices. We need your questions and your engagement. Okay, am I still going? Looking for non-financial skill builders for your, so the other thing is some of the agencies are like, look, we've maxed out the money. We really tried. We put in a grant. It didn't come through. So you can say, great, are there other non-financial skill builders that would strengthen my resume? Like, is there a training that I could go to or a certificate? I'm thinking of one of our agencies that for years we were pushing, like, we really need a stipend here. Because you're asking a lot from these students, and they couldn't come up with as much of a stipend. They have a small stipend, but they were able to come up with a $2,500 certification and open that up to our students so that they could go through this program and get certified in, I don't know, something clinical. So, you know, not exactly what we were looking for, but it was good. We've had students who the agency supported them in going to a conference, especially if it was negotiated at the beginning, right? Like, I know they all have, because you've already done your homework, you poked around the website maybe, or you've talked to somebody, I don't know. But maybe there are conferences that they go to. You could go to San Antonio for a conference and they could pay for you. We've had students who went, who were paid by their agency to go to Ethiopia. So there are opportunities like that. Are there chances for you to be involved in that? Are there any external activities that would be helpful for you? Do you have the opportunity to lead any trainings? Yeah, so that gets you out in front of people in a leadership way, as a networking opportunity. And lunches and other perks probably should have been on the slide before. That's my bad. But I'm thinking of one agency that we have in particular that like feeds the students the whole time they're there. They have beer in their coolers at the internship. We do not recommend, in fact, it's against policy to consume alcohol while you're in your internship. However, they have drinks and food galore. So sometimes like non-alcoholic beverages galore. So sometimes there are other opportunities. I know there's a district judge down south who they know that they don't have the money, their budget, whatever. So they give vouchers to the students so that they can go and have lunch in the air. So they get a $10 voucher a day. So that's $50 a week. So things like that.
All right. So when you're in the interview, we've got some examples of instead of try this, and then we're going to pop you into little breakout rooms and you get to do your own instead of try this. So the first one is instead of, I really need a stipend of $200 a week because of the cost of living in Austin. Versus, I'm wondering if you have any benefits, including travel reimbursements, training, or certificate programs. Because the first one, everybody knows the cost of living in Austin. But what we want to do is focus on what specifics might help you. So in addition to the stipend, some benefits about travel, training, certificate programs. The next one is instead of, well, I didn't make anything at my first practicum placement, so I guess something is better than nothing. Try, what is the likelihood of employment after graduation? Or has your agency hired interns in the past after graduation? So playing around with, go ahead, Tanya.
I was just going to add to that, but go ahead. Finish your thought and then.
No, please add.
All right. And related to that is a lot of what we find is that a lot of our students get a portion of our students, not the majority, a portion of our students get hired by their internships. Others, though, a higher percentage report that they got hired because of their internships, because of networking opportunities. And so what is the likelihood of employment after graduation? They say pretty much nil. You say, well, back to leadership opportunities, the opportunity to present at a training or something. Are there opportunities for me to network with partnering agencies that might be more likely to hire interns? Yeah.
Excellent. And one last one. I saw the stipend is X amount, but I'm really going to need more than that. Versus, Thank you so much for meeting with me. After learning more about the opportunity, I feel like I'd be a really great match for this program. I wonder if there's any room to increase or add a stipend based on the skills that I'll be bringing to the agency. So again, it's founded in what you're already bringing. You all have, regardless of your experience, you have a first year practicum under your belt. I always encourage students, go back to your evaluation, go back to your final reflection from last year and pull out the skills that you are bringing to the agency. So this is closer to an employment sort of thing, like, well, I'm bringing this and I really think it's worth this much. So you're highlighting those skills for the practicum instructor, which is super important.
And we have one more instead of try this, actually. I changed the
Oh,
format of the next slide, Mary.
Oh, that's all you.
Instead of why haven't you applied for federal work study funding available through the School of Social Work, you can say, you can still apply for federal work study funding even if you haven't already. It allows agencies to provide a $3,500 base pay for spring 24 social work interns. I'm happy to follow up with an email, including easy links, more information, and Dean Tanya Voss's email for questions. So again, we're helping them do this, right? You can, when you follow up and say, thank you so much for the interview, if y'all have agreed upon it, if you feel like you have an invitation to do so, then you can include information that we will provide to you after this training, when we send out the Zoom link and all the stuff, the PowerPoint. We will include something that you could just attach and forward that has those handy dandy links.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is breakout rooms. And we have 15, 12 people. Let's make sure everyone got back. Let's see, I think we're still waiting for 2 more.
That should be everyone now.
Be everyone back?
But you can
All right.
see how practicing in the role play gives you a chance to stumble with someone where you don't feel like it matters as much. And so it is actually a good idea to practice what you're going to say before you go into an interview, right? So absolutely.
Practice, 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 and write it down. It's totally okay to write down and have some notes and be like, can I just refer to my notes for a minute here? So I want to hear from y'all. What was the experience like? There were some great conversations going on, and I want you to unmute and share things that worked, things that felt messy. Let's have a conversation.
We had a question.
Yes.
So sometimes some of the internship that are at like private companies or like private practices will charge their clients like $50 for a session or whatever it is. Yet they don't offer a stipend.
Yep.
So, but bringing that up would feel kind of confrontational. Is that just something you should leave out of the conversation?
Which part would feel confrontational?
To, just to be like, I see that interns, you're charging your clients like $50 for a session with the intern. I'm wondering like if you would consider offering a stipend because of that. I don't know. I don't want to like, be like, why aren't you doing that?
That's one way to approach it. Yes. And just so you know, behind the scenes at the Community Partnership Development Committee, we go round and round with sort of the philosophical perspective of having these for-profit, private practices come in and not paying our students. We let them know up front, hey, you really need to think about being able to pay your student here because you're benefiting directly financially from them. Whereas at a school, there's no financial necessary benefit, but this setting in particular. So I would approach that from a curiosity perspective. So instead of, I noticed this isn't happening, something like, I'm curious, could you tell me a little bit about the pay that clients pay to meet with me versus a licensed person, and how that compensates the agency versus my role in that, and how there might be some room for compensation for me? Or can you tell me how the conversations that happened around how much you're charging clients for their work with me versus a licensed person? Okay, I'm curious, is there any room possibly once I have more experience, maybe say in March or so, that you'd be more comfortable with me getting some financial compensation? Or having those conversations from a curiosity perspective, does that feel like it might be a little bit less confrontational, Andrea?
Definitely. I'm gonna definitely watch this recording and like write down what you said word for word, because that was awesome.
Great. Yeah, and it is a tricky one. And just so y'all know, we do have those conversations behind the scenes before they even land in your lap as an option, and balancing that with the social work ethics and values, what the social work career is for. And so, yes, continue those conversations. Great question. Thank you.
That's actually part of what our agencies are looking for, is for us to come in and push them and encourage them to evolve with the profession over time. And so those questions are exactly what we wrestle with. And one of the reasons that we offer these kinds of internships for final field, where you have the choice in the matter, versus placing you someplace like that.
Other questions or thoughts, reflections that came up from the role play?
I just want to follow up on what you just said, Dean Box, because I think what came up for me is like, also my dogs are wrestling in the background. I'm sorry if you can hear that. Like, no, I know it sounds cliche, but like knowing your worth and knowing that this is an exchange, like we're not just there for an opportunity, but we're there bringing beneficial skills and like an opportunity for the agency to learn as well. And then really knowing like what you want and being flexible with it. But like, for example, with Miranda and I, she was kind of giving me some feedback about like, you know, asking me for opportunities, what I might want. And I was like, oh, I guess I don't really know. So like being really clear about what you're looking for, what you're willing to kind of negotiate on. I think I'm going to make like a list of like, oh yeah, I would like, you know, this and this and this. I can be flexible with it, but just to have it going in.
Yeah. And the other thing I was going to say, so Professor Beer was talking about, you know, going in with curiosity. One of the things that we found, so some of the, I in particular drag my feet on the LLCs, the private practice folks, because I want it to be, I think they should pay our interns. One of the things that came up that surprised me, you know, coming from a place of curiosity, was, yes, they had their for-profit side of things. They also had their nonprofit side of things. So they would carry these cases pro bono, or they had these that were referred to them by CPS. And so one of the things that my hope would be down the road is that they would actually turn that into a nonprofit, so that they could be federal work study funding eligible and go that direction. But I think being curious about that, not going in assuming everybody else is getting $120 an hour and I'm getting nothing, versus actually I'm getting this education, I'm working in this particular area, they're moving that direction, which is not enough, and we need to keep challenging them to move that direction faster and to arrive at being able to provide funding for our students. But to be careful about our assumptions coming in. It's not that everybody else is getting $120 an hour and you're not. I don't think. We've done our due diligence to vet for that, at least.
And Amelia, were you suggesting that you yourself come up with a list of things that you would like from the placement as far as certifications and conferences go too?
Yeah, just like being really clear. I feel like there's just so much gray area, especially like with, you know, female dominated career professions, about like worth and money and value, and just like being really, like Miranda said, like don't sell yourself short. Just know what you want, you know, maybe have a list of it before you go in, because there is already culturally this idea that we don't get, I mean, we're not paid as much as men. And so like just really being, and I know Sammy's in here, but just really being clear about your value and what you're bringing, I think is a really big thing.
I think it's huge. Absolutely, that it's huge. That's a social justice female issue, you know, and other gender issues for sure. And I think that even though your cover letter was broad for all agencies, your interview is specific to that agency. So go in with your list from that particular agency, do your research and say, hey, I noticed you have a therapist who's certified in TFCBT. I would really like to look at how that process happens. What are the options for me meeting with that person in particular? Or I noticed that your agency is really heavy on TBRI, or the neurosequential model. So you specify your needs list for that interview instead of broadening it. So broad cover letter, more specific for the agencies that you're going to. I noticed that people have gone to this conference or presented to this conference. Is there an opportunity for me to co-present with someone at this year's conference? So that's where you get specifics in the interview. Does that help a little bit, Amelia, as far as that list and really knowing? I like Miranda's point. Go in, sell what your skills are and know what you want from each individual agency.
Yeah, definitely. That's really helpful.
Great. Other reflections, thoughts, or questions from the role play before we have just a few more slides?
So Sulema brought up a really good point when we were in our I hope you don't mind me sharing the point about the like billable hours thing.
Oh, I don't mind. Go ahead.
Okay, so that sometimes last year, some interns were told they were going to get a certain amount, but then when they got to the agency, it was like, oh, well, you're actually only going to be paid based on, you know, billable hours, and not everything is billable. So you don't get the full amount. So Sulema's idea was to ask them, like, how is the stipend going to be distributed?
Great.
Which I thought was a really great question.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yes, everyone write that one down. That's good. Yep. Is there any clarification around what this might look like in practice? Yeah.
Yeah. What do I need to do in order to be eligible to receive the full stipend?
Yep.
That they've advertised. Yeah.
Yep. Great points. All right, let's jump back into the last few slides we have here, and then we can open it up for more questions at the end. And we've talked about some of this already, but Tanya, do you want to do this one?
Sure. I mean, just, you know, give them the opportunity to go back and advocate to their supervisor or somebody and say, I know we said we couldn't do a stipend, but really, I mean, look what the student would bring to us. They've got this kind of skills and this kind of, look at the certifications they have. They're in the military social work scholar, certificate program or school or whatever it is. They're bilingual in these, or trilingual or whatever, whatever it is, they're a dual degree student. Highlight your strengths so that you're giving all this information to the person who's interviewing you, so that they can go back and think, I bet the higher ups, I bet somebody who's got the purse strings doesn't really understand what we're getting. That they're thinking just students, not people who have this kind of skills and this kind of certification and this sort of dual degree and this sort of training. So give them what they need to be able to go back and advocate.
And also with this one, this is another example of going in with something written down. They have your resume, they've read your cover letter, but they've probably looked at 5 to 10 other resumes and cover letters. So in the interview, again, this is where you bring specific how your skills match that placement and really highlight it in that moment. And if you need to have a list, not just your resume, because you have to sort through, but just a list, just like this of, oh, let me just see if I missed. Oh, yes, let me tell you about this experience I have. You can absolutely go in with your written up what you want to do. In fact, it shows you're prepared for the interview and you're invested in the interview. So somebody at the beginning in the chat said, wait for the, when do I say? We've talked a lot about what to say, but when do you say it? So I'm going to ask you guys, when might you bring this up? When might you bring this conversation up? And you can pop it in the chat box or unmute. Or is it something you're going to open with? Weave it in the middle, wait until the end. What feels natural to you? Whoops, I've got a sensitive mouse here. What might work? When do you think might work?
Honestly, I feel like I would brag about myself and then bring it up.
Excellent. So open with the humble brag.
Exactly.
Perfect. And then go for that. And now that you know what I'm bringing, let's do it. Definitely not open. Yep. Amelia would weave it in the middle. Other thoughts?
Yes, I like this one. So you don't end on a note where they feel unsure. Like you do want to, I think of it as late middle, but also you want to, and this will be the next slide, I'm jumping ahead, but then you want to close strong with, I'm really interested and this is what I would bring. And if those things are true for you, then those are the kinds of things that you want to close with.
Yeah, middle to end, unless it comes up earlier, of course. So of course you're going to follow the natural flow of conversation, but if it does not come up.
Yeah, it's not a hard and fast rule.
Yeah, exactly. Go with the flow. Use your social work skills. Read the room. But then as you start to wrap up and end the negotiation, 100%, y'all are going to do this already, but express appreciation for the opportunity to even have the discussion around stipends. And something to perhaps keep in mind is that the practicum instructor currently is not being necessarily financially compensated either, and that you're practicing under their license. So as much as they go to bat for you, anytime we can express appreciation for our practicum instructors is magical. Like, they are doing this for the intrinsic value of wanting to continue helping in the community and their dedication towards education. So definitely express that appreciation to even having the conversation. And most importantly, if they can't offer or increase the stipend, let them know you still want the position, if that's the case. So if it's a deal breaker, you know, you don't have to say that in the interview, like, well, never mind, I don't want this. But if you still want it, because I was a practicum instructor for 8 years and I offered a final placement once and had no money attached to it. Unfortunately, it was with the school district and no students took it because I didn't offer the stipends. But they let me know in the interview, hey, you know, I would really still like to be considered for this, even though there's not a stipend. It didn't work out in the end, but the fact that they said that let me know, okay, perfect, they're still interested. And that's where you want to weigh all those other things we talked about. What are the other benefits? Is it worth it to you if there's no increase or no stipend at all? So that's how you might want to wrap it up. And I think I just like to end things with minions because they make me happy. So in the last few minutes here, we have almost 10 minutes left. I'm going to unshare and we can talk a little bit more. If someone wants to do a role play in front of everybody else or, you know, anything like that, we can certainly do that. Let me stop sharing here. All right, so let's just open it up for questions. If somebody wants to try a role play out, open it up.
I have a question. So back to federal work study, I'm wondering like what it looks like for them to apply so that in the interview I can kind of use language like that around it instead of being like, well, I don't really know, you know, what it takes, but can you do it?
How about we do this, Tanya and you, we can role play. I'll be the practicum instructor, you be the student.
Okay.
Try and sell me on the federal work study. Okay, so Tanya, great interview. You know, I really enjoyed getting to meet you and I think you could bring a lot to our agency.
Great. No, I'm excited about it too. Sounds like you'll have so much going on. I would particularly love working with person A doing that thingamajig B. So I noticed that there's no stipend, which I understand that not all agencies, that's a hard thing to get to, right? But did you know there's a new program through the UT Steve Hicks School for federal work study funding that would allow you to provide or would allow eligible agencies to provide a $3,500 base for the spring semester at zero cost to the agency. You just have to be a nonprofit or an educational setting or governmental. You're a shoe-in. Yeah, and so I'd love to connect you with some of those resources.
That sounds amazing. You know, I think I may have heard about it, but I haven't really dug into it yet. Like, so this is zero costs to the agency, and then the students can get, how much did you say?
$3,500 for their internship in the spring.
That's fantastic. What are the next steps? What do I need to do?
I would be happy to send you, they've provided us the information with all the links so that you could go in there. I filled out my FAFSA and I know that I'm eligible. And so that's what has to happen is I have to be eligible and you have to be eligible and then we both have to be approved. My understanding is that the application itself only takes about 30 minutes, that the challenge really can be just talking to people on your team and getting them to understand what it's about. But I can send you the link. I've clicked on the link and I went through there and I know that basically it's like a 4-page application asking about what your funding sources are, proving that not everything, but just like, are you federally funded or is it from foundations or donations? And it looks really pretty straightforward. We've got lots of agencies I know that are already jumping on board, so we're excited about it.
That sounds great. Sign me up.
Okay, well, I can't sign you up, but I can absolutely follow up this wonderful conversation that we've had with more information so that you can just click and get more. If you do have questions, though, I know that Dean Voss, Tanya Voss at the school,
she's amazing. Available. Yeah, she's really great.
That she's available to ask questions if you have those, and also the financial aid office has been great about answering questions. So we've got agencies signing up. Yeah.
Great. And cut. Now we're going to do a role play and I'm going to be the student because Tanya's the expert and she just said a whole lot of stuff that even I don't remember. And so now I'm going to be the student and what it might sound like if I didn't have all that information in front of me. Ready?
Okay. So, well, this has been great. Do you have any other questions for me?
I do. I have a question. At school, we've been talking a lot about this federal work study program where students can earn up to $3,500 in a placement. Are you familiar with that at all?
I saw something about that. They've sent it out a couple of times. Yeah.
So-
we haven't really, what do you know about it?
Well, so my understanding is that it's a relatively short painless application that agencies apply, and then I apply with my FAFSA. And if we both are eligible, then I can earn that money. And I've already applied, I've already put in my FAFSA, and I know I'm eligible. And so really the next thing for you, I can, do you know Dean Voss?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Okay, so I can connect you with Dean Voss. If you email her, I can send an introduction email that you're interested in the federal work study program, and she can walk you through the process. I don't know all the ins and outs as a student, but I do know it's something I'd be super interested in exploring.
Okay. Do you know how long it takes? Like, is it a quick turnaround? Is it going to take, like, do you apply now for next year? When would this?
I think if I have it right, I believe if you apply now, we could start the funding in January. But I also heard that we can start applying in January, but the earlier the better. And
Okay.
again, Dean Voss can answer all those kind of questions.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, we can look at it. I can't give any guarantees. Our legal department's kind of legal sometimes.
Totally get it. But anyway, it's
All
been
right.
a great meeting with you. And even if you can't get the federal work study, I would still really love the opportunity to have this as a placement option.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your time, and let me talk to you a little bit about our next steps.
Excellent. Thank you.
And see.
So mine was very generic and I didn't have a lot of information. So you don't have to have all the language to have this conversation. Amelia, quote of the day, our legal department is kind of legal sometimes.
Well, that's what it feels like.
So yeah, thoughts or feedback about those two role plays, and it could sound either way in your interview. And was that helpful, Andrea? I think that was your question.
Yes, super helpful. Thank you. And I'm guessing since we are being given the links, we will also have like all the information of what it takes for them to apply and etc.
Well, yeah, what I've been learning is that we have the information of what the application form looks like. What we don't have is what does it look like behind the scenes? How many lawyers do they have to talk to? Who's in their HR? Is their human resources? Is their executive director on board with this whole idea? And so one of the things that I toyed with, like halfway through the role play, the last scenario that Mary and I were doing, I thought, oh, I should have played somebody who isn't really on board with this, because there are agencies that are crossing their arms and going, now what? What is this? And I don't have time to do anything else. So the application itself, and I do encourage you to click that link and look at it. It's really very straightforward and short. And what I've heard from people who've applied is it takes 30 to 40 minutes to actually fill it out. What takes the time is going behind the scenes to get the buy-in from the rest of the agency. And so the larger the agency, the slower we're seeing the process be.
I really liked what you said when you were like, a lot of agencies, I wrote it down. Hold on a second. You said a lot of agencies are already on board and we're really excited about it. It kind of puts pressure on them in a way, but like in a way that's not confronting them.
Yeah, that's what we're doing, is we're changing the culture.
Mm-hmm.
And we've come a long way, but we've got a long way to go, and we're excited. So yes, I'm excited about the federal work study hugely because it's putting money in students' pockets. But I'll tell you another thing that's very exciting to me is students using their voices to help make this change happen with the agencies, because we send them emails. We've done Zoom we've been talking about this all summer into the fall. But what's making the difference, the emails that I'm getting from the agencies are, I was talking to my student and they said, I was talking to my intern and she said, and that's getting their attention more than our institution can. So one of the things that I'm super excited about is your voices gently, but persistently putting this out there.
The email that you all keep referencing, did we get sent an email with like a template and links to talk about federal work study?
I think you did after the kickoff, but we're going to send it again.
Okay, I can go back and look too.
It's a handy dandy one-page attachment. It doesn't look like very much because we're trying to keep it very, very simple. But it's got the links that they need and the contacts and the email information that they need.
Okay,
and
great.
all agencies have already have this information. They just may not have opened it yet. So it's not as if you are the first. You may be because they haven't opened their emails, but just so you know, again, behind the scenes, We have been pushing this with agencies from August on, actually probably earlier than that. I know they started this summer. So you are not the first voice, even though you may feel like it in the interview. You can just say, here's a handy dandy one pager. Please reach out to Dean Voss. I know lots of agencies are getting on board with this, and it's benefiting both the students and the agencies. So yeah. In our last minute, any other questions, feedback, aha moments? I hope this was helpful. And again, Tanya and I, or Dean Voss and I, are available for anything, anytime. Just send us an email, and I'm happy to do some role plays if anybody wants to meet up and have a role play fiesta. We can do that.
Extravaganza.
And hopefully, if you go back to where you were let's do this to end out here. Think about the number where you were an hour ago. Has that number increased one at all? Or where are you now? 1 to 10. 10 is, I am 100% on this, and 1 is not at all. Love to see if there's any difference. 8, Amelia, wow, 5.
Oh, that's a big
The
number.
exclamation points. 3,
Okay.
6.5, 7, 6.5.
Moving in the right direction.
7.5. And that's really helpful feedback for us, because now that this is recording, other students can watch it and will be able to take this and do it again. So I'm glad this was helpful. Awesome. Well, everyone have a really great afternoon, and it's supposed to be amazing weather this weekend. Get outside, enjoy it, whatever that might look like for you. All right. Have a good
Thank you so
afternoon.
much for coming.
Bye,
Bye.
y'all.